Okay, here we go again. Welcome to the Otherppl Show, a weekly podcast featuring in-depth conversations with today's leading writers. It is a books and culture show. I'm Brad Listi. I'm your host. This is my podcast. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Hope you're okay out there. Hope you're hanging on. Hope you're not watching the news too much or getting obsessed with the constant flow of weird and disturbing information. And yet I also want you to stay informed. It's just trying to strike a balance. That's what I'm trying to do. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. And you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky, if that sounds appealing. I have a great episode for you today. I'm going to be talking with Joseph O'Neill about his novel Godwin, which is now available in trade paperback from Vintage. Godwin was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. And what can I tell you about this novel? It is at once a sports story, a story of an office drama, a family story, a story that explores post-colonialism, capitalism, greed, like a midlife crisis, exploitation. It's an adventure story. It's a wonderful novel. I loved it. And again, it's called Godwin. And you're going to hear Joseph and I get into what happens at length in the conversation. So just stay tuned for that. You'll get a sense of what goes on in this novel. But it's excellent. And I had a great time talking with Joseph O'Neill, who is making his Otherppl debut. So otherwise, the rains are coming back for a couple of days here in Los Angeles. I think this is the last of the atmospheric river. We had a little bit of a break, and now it's going to come back for a couple days. And there's a guy in our neighborhood recently. I mean, people tend to cycle in and out. You'll start to see the same unhoused people in the neighborhood on a regular basis. I don't know how it works. But, here he is. He's got no shoes. He's in bad shape. I see him all the time, and it's upsetting. And so I was talking with my wife, and she was like, do you have any socks? We can give this guy some socks. And I was like, socks? He needs shoes. Like, what? He's outside. What are we going to do? Just give the guy some socks? I mean, we do need socks for him, but not just socks. So I go upstairs and I'm collecting socks from my drawer. I have, I'll give the guy some socks. And I have these really warm socks that I really don't even wear because I live in Los Angeles, but they're called Smart Wool. Have you ever had a pair of these? They're great. They're really warm. I used to wear them all the time in Colorado when I lived there, and I've had them just sitting there. So I was like, give him these, give him some, some other socks that aren't like super heavy duty. And then take these Birkenstocks, because this guy, I mean, it's really upsetting. His feet, he's barefoot. His feet are like black and gross and just not in good shape. And I don't know how anybody walks around a city like this without any shoes or socks on. And it's getting cold and it's going to rain. And so I was like, take these Birkenstocks, just give this guy some sandals. He can at least slip these on, put some socks on, the socks and sandals thing. And so my wife goes out to find this guy and to give him a bag of items, like some wipes and so, like a toothbrush, just something for this poor guy, a blanket. And then I get a text message from her just a little bit ago, and she's like, yeah, he took everything but the sandals. He said, I'm fine. Like she quoted him in her text message, like he just kept saying, I'm fine, I'm fine. So I'm like, what? Like, you just want the socks? You don't? I mean, these things, and they were the right size too, or close enough. Didn't want shoes. So it's like, what do you do with that? I mean, this guy he's obviously not well mentally. So it's hard to kind of convince him. You know what I'm saying? What are you going to do? Negotiate with him? Please take the shoes, put the shoes on. But at least he has some socks now. But they're going to get all wet when it rains. you navigate this stuff living in a big city. And, the homelessness thing is just such a crisis. I don't know what to do. I'm trying to act locally, take care of the guy in my neighborhood, give him some shoes. Didn't want the shoes. I'm not qualified to go in there and try to deal with this on like a psychological mental health level. Not many people are. I feel like we need to have an organization, some sort of governmental team that could come in and help. Bring in some medical people. He needs to be treated, right? Anyway, I was out last night with a friend of mine who listeners of the Brad and Mira show will know him. His Angry Adam is what he goes by on that show. And we were driving, we went to a concert together. We were driving there and we got into a conversation and he started, I forget what we were talking about, but he's like, "You're so resentful." He's like, you're seething with resentment of the rich. And I was like, what? Like, I started to think about it. Like, am I seething with resentment? I don't think I'm constantly seething with resentment, but sometimes I am. I guess it just depends. And what I said was, I think I'm resentful of the fact that, I feel like I have to get rich to survive. And moreover, I have a disabled child. So I'm thinking about his future in this country. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, who's going to take care of him? It's either going to be me or it's going to be probably my daughter. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that burden to fall to her. So I'm like, I've got to get rich. I never have really cared about getting rich. And yet the circumstances of this country, politically and economically, coupled with my personal circumstances and the lack of support for the disabled community, politically, financially, socially, and otherwise, it's just like I feel like I'm in this trap where I'm like, I've got to do it. I've got to find a way to get rich. And I'm not wired for it. I'm not an investment banker. I'm not some hyper capitalist. I'm not super competitive even. And so it feels like I have to put on this outfit that doesn't fit me or something. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to kind of jam my foot into a shoe, just to continue with this shoe thing. I'm trying to jam my foot into a shoe that doesn't fit me, and yet I kind of have to. I feel like I have to. I can feel resentful of that set of circumstances. But then I also think of like the oligarch class, and I think of the billionaire class and the outsized influence that they have over our political class, and then by extension of that, our lives. And I'm like, yeah, I'm resentful of that. Shouldn't we all be resentful of that? Isn't that like the decent position? My friend was like, well, I don't care, or you shouldn't get all caught up in it. And I think he was kind of taking on this posture of like being more zen about it than I am. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be toxic with resentment. Maybe sometimes I am. And then I also feel on a certain level that privilege equals responsibility. Like the more privileged you are, the more money you have, the more life has sort of gone your way. I feel like you do have a responsibility to pay it forward and to help people who have not been so fortunate. And I don't think that happens most of the time. And it does kind of fuck with my head because I know a lot of wealthy people. And I'm thinking to myself, what are they doing to help people who are struggling? And I guess sometimes they might donate to charity. I don't know. The truth is that I don't know. But I find myself wondering if it's all that much at all, like if anything's happening. And then I can start to be like, fuck this, man. This is messed up. This isn't how it should be. And maybe that's a kind of resentment. How am I supposed to handle it is the question. I don't know. What am I supposed to say? How are we supposed to communicate about this? How am I supposed to talk to myself about this? I don't begrudge somebody who like builds a business or works really hard and has success in their career. I have no problem with that. I think that's great. But I do wonder sometimes, like, what do we owe each other? I just talked about this a little bit with Jennifer Eli Bowen on the show. It's on my mind. I think it's on a lot of our minds. What do we owe each other? How can we create a more equitable arrangement for human beings? Not that we all have to have exactly the same amount or anything, but just there can't be a guy in the streets without any shoes in a state of like serious mental health collapse who's just filthy and untended to, and it's getting cold and the rains are coming in. We can do better than that, right? We can't have like disabled people just left to their own devices or left to the tedium of very underwhelming government aid and bureaucracy. That's just my feeling. So yeah, I guess I do have some anger, but I'm not hopefully dominated by it. Anyway, made me think, and I just want to quickly do a couple of plugs. First of all, for my newsletter, you can sign up for it over at bradlisti.substack.com. If you want to hear from me once a week in your inbox, you can keep up with the latest episodes of this program. I also share a list of links to things that I've been reading and finding interesting. So check it out over at bradlisti.substack.com. And I want to give a plug to Deep Dive, my company. Deep Dive is a learning platform that creates in-depth courses for people with curious minds. There are now currently 3 courses available from Deep Dive. They are all writing courses. I'm the host of each of these courses. They sort of combine the best of academia with the engagement and entertainment value of a great podcast conversation. So there's a course, like the flagship course is How to Write a Novel. It's more than 50 hours in length, and it features nearly 4 dozen acclaimed contemporary authors as teachers. And then there are 2 shorter form courses. One is called How to Get the Reader on Board with Steve Almond, and another is called How to Write Autobiographical Fiction. That course is taught by Hannah Pittard, and it features Michael Wheaton, the founder of Autofocus Books. And the big reveal here today with regard to Deep Dive is that our biggest sale of the year is coming up, the Cyber Monday sale. Cyber Monday is the Monday after Thanksgiving, and all courses from Deep Dive are going to be available for 50% off on Cyber Monday, and actually Cyber Tuesday too. It's a 48-hour sale. It starts at midnight on Monday, December 1st, and it goes all the way until 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, December 2nd. So it's 48 hours long. You can save 50% on all courses, bundles, you name it. Whatever you buy, you get 50% off. And I want to emphasize that Deep Dive courses are the perfect gift to yourself if you're a writer, or to somebody you know who is a writer or who wants to be a writer. And you can send a Deep Dive course as a gift very easily. All you got to do is just check the box, send as a gift, when you get to checkout. So you'll see it. You get to checkout, it'll say send as a gift. You check that box and you can pick the day and time when the gift or when the course or courses will be delivered to the recipient. So if you want the email to arrive on Christmas morning, we can do that for you. All right. So Cyber Monday, 48 hours, 50% off of everything. Mark it in your calendars and save. If you want to start exploring the courses and kind of get a feel for what's there, just go to the website. It's www.deepdive.audio. All right, so my guest once again is Joseph O'Neill. His novel Godwin is available now in trade paperback from Vintage. Again, it was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Joseph O'Neill's other novels include The Dog and Netherland. He's also the author of a family history called Blood Dark Track and a short story collection called Good Trouble. His stories appear regularly in the New Yorker magazine, and his essays appear in the New York Review of Books and The Guardian. Netherland won the Faulkner Award for Fiction and the Carey Fiction Prize, and it was longlisted for the Booker. The Dog was also longlisted for the Booker Prize and was shortlisted for the Wodehouse Prize. Joseph O'Neill lives in Brooklyn, and he teaches at Bard College. And it was an absolute pleasure reading this novel of his and talking with him about it. Again, the book is called Godwin, out there now in trade paperback from Vintage. Here I am talking with Joseph O'Neill.
You know, you finish a novel and you sort of rummage around your brain. And I'm not one of these novelists who has 10 stories hovering in the, you know, waiting to land like some writers do, very fortunate writers. And I felt in this novel that I began with this idea of a soccer prodigy in Africa. And I have a cousin who is a soccer agent based in France and also based in England. And so I had some sense of the world of soccer agents. And so I had this idea of Africa and of a protagonist who comes from the United States to Africa and all the sort of, and backwards and forwards of the transatlantic kind of adventure and all of the historical kind of drama that would imply. And I started writing that story. And of course, I love football. It's a game I've been obsessed with probably since I was about 6 years old. And it was something I knew. It was a world I knew a little bit about. And so I started writing that story, which is the story of two half-brothers, one of whom is based in London, who's a soccer agent, a struggling, young, slightly idiotic soccer agent. And this sort of his American older half-brother who lives in Pittsburgh and is a technical writer and sort of sees himself as a very clever, smart guy who maybe had white guy who maybe had sort of big ambitions and did have big ambitions, you know, to become a kind of tech dude, basically, with his friends. Those ambitions never quite panned out in the sense that he never became a billionaire, like a lot of these guys seem to have become. And so on the one hand, and he lives with his Sri Lankan wife and their daughter in Pittsburgh. So on the one hand, he has a happy family life. But he's gnawed away at this slight dissatisfaction with his life, which is something a lot of kind of guys hitting 40s. He's hitting 40, sort of off in white guys in that are of my acquaintance, sort of encounter. You sort of take stock of your life and you think, well, maybe the sort of dreams I had of sort of, a grand destiny have not been realized until he hears from his younger brother, who he doesn't really know very well, who says to him, can you come and help me find this soccer prodigy who surfaced on the internet and who I can't track down, but I know you're very smart and you know about these things, and can you help me find him? And we'll find him, we'll bring him to Europe, and by implication, we'll make lots of money. And so that was the starting. And I worked on that story for a number of years, actually. And then I got the feeling that it wasn't enough, and this voice entered my head, and I started writing in this other voice as second narrator. And I realized after several pages that this was a woman's voice. This voice belonged to a woman.
Interesting. This is Lakeisha.
Lakeisha. And then I realized that she was black. And it's a very technical, bureaucratic, slightly Ishiguro-esque, to my mind, Ishiguro-esque kind of voice. And I wasn't quite sure what she was doing in the story, but I knew that this person was the work colleague of my other narrator, Mark Wolf, in Pittsburgh at this technical writing cooperative. And so the two stories started to grow alongside each other. And I wasn't quite sure why that was happening.
That's fascinating.
Until I got to the end and I realized, that's why that's happening.
Okay. So just to kind of clarify for listeners, this is a braided narrative. You have these two POV characters who are narrating the story. You have Mark telling his story about his brother and these trips overseas and this soccer prodigy named Godwin, who is in some unknown place in West Africa. And then you have Lakeisha narrating a kind of bureaucratic office politics narrative as Mark's coworker at this place called The Group, which is like a collective of technical writers in Pittsburgh that I think Lakeisha founded. Do I have that right?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so you said something that's interesting to me on a creative note, which is that this voice just started like flowering in your mind. You started to hear Lakeisha's voice without knowing precisely who it was. What does that actually look like in practice? Like you're sitting at your computer and suddenly you just start typing?
Well, what it looks like in practice is you start becoming slightly fed up with your other voice, the masculine first person, which I've written 2.5 novels in basically at this point. And you sort of feel that you need a palate cleansing other voice. And so I wanted something very calm, very matter of fact, a voice I've never sort of written in before. And I started that voice just explaining this world of the co-op and writing about Mark. She's telling the story of Mark, but she gets sort of sidetracked into this story of the co-op and how the ideals of the cooperative are under threat. And again, the whole story is set in 2015, before the rise of the current president. And because I didn't want to get involved in that, it felt too direct. But the fate of the co-op with its ideals comes under enormous pressure from 1 or 2 bad actors in the co-op. And so I somehow felt that this was connected to Mark's fate. And I afterwards, once I was done with it, and I lived in terror for a number of years. As you can imagine, I'm betting a number of years of my writing life on this. And I kept asking myself, why am I telling these stories really next to each other? And then, of course, at the end, it became very obvious why. But we don't want to particularly go into that. But it was a kind of dramatic sort of ending in many ways. And it was enabled by this risk. I mean, you're taking a risk let me put it this way. If you have one narrator, you have a huge advantage, which is that your novel has this unity. You know, it's a classic structure, the single narrator. You get used to that point of view. You get used to his voice. But if you kind of then bifurcate the novel into 2 stories, it's almost like you're building a chair with 3 legs if you're not careful, or 2 legs. And so you have to be very, very sure at the end of the day. You have to make sure that the whole thing doesn't topple over, because it's not a natural structure. I don't think a two-voiced story is a very natural structure. You have to handle it quite carefully. And you just don't know how it's going to. Well, thankfully, I think it doesn't fall over at the end. The story does stand up.
No, it's a beautiful ending. It must have been so thrilling and relieving to you to land on that ending. I mean, we're not going to get into the details because I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, writing as you were, sort of up on a high wire as an act of faith, which I think to some degree any novel project tends to be, but especially one like this, where you got these 2 characters, these 2 perspectives, these 2 voices. And like you said, for a period of years, you weren't entirely sure how the 2 were going to work together. That's an act of faith.
There's that technical issue, that sort of structural issue, but there's also the issue of writing from the point of view of a black woman.
Right.
And I say black woman, I mean African American woman. I know a lot about Afro-Caribbean culture, and that stuff I can do all day because that's part of my daily life. But but just like I don't know, and also Mark also is an American white guy from the Midwest, from Arizona, lives in Pittsburgh. He's obviously a kind of bourgeois specimen, a well-educated guy with leftist ideas about certain theories about certain things. So I felt reasonably comfortable with him. But Lakeisha came to me, I suspect, because of a visit I took to Milwaukee, where she's from.
Town of my birth.
The town of your birth, a soccer town you were telling me before we...
Yeah. I mean, as in so much as an American city can be, or a region can be like football first or soccer first, the Wisconsin of my youth was very much that way.
Yeah, but because of the German history. The
German history, for sure. I think also a lot of Scandinavians, but the Germanic influence in Milwaukee was, I think, the principal reason for it. And it was like the number 1 sport at the high school I would have gone to had we not moved away.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I knew Milwaukee because in 2020, that's how recently, in 2020, I sort of woke up in the middle of the night and it sort of dawned on me that if the north side of Milwaukee voted came out to vote, Joe Biden would be elected president. Because, as you know, Wisconsin is a very close, one of these kind of swing states where the election is won and lost by a handful of votes. And Hillary Clinton lost in large part because she didn't turn out in Milwaukee, north side of Milwaukee, which is a famous historic African-American community. And so I became politically involved in an effort to turn out and organize and help organize the people of North Milwaukee. And for that reason, I went to Milwaukee and met some people there from the north side, which is where Lakeisha comes from. And I met one woman in particular who was a great grassroots organizer there. And I said to myself, and I didn't think about this as a literary kind of, fact-finding mission. I was worried about winning the election, which we did, of course.
Yes.
And Milwaukee turned out, and the whole thing turned out to be a fruitful effort. But then I think I came back from all of that, and then it must have been in 2021 or 22 that this Lakeisha character came to me. And I realized as I was writing it that it could only have come from one place, the confidence to write about someone like this, which is to say a working class young woman from a very kind of profoundly entrenched culture in the north side of Milwaukee. Everybody there knows everybody. And of course, north side of Milwaukee, I discovered, as I took an interest in the place, is the worst place in the United States to grow up as a black child. The outcomes are the worst, or were 5 years ago. And so this Lakeisha is someone who goes to the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and is subjected to a kind of white savior experience, which is normally familiar to us from Africa. In the sense that a German professor says to her, look, who's aware of her extremely unstable domestic situation, which comes from a very difficult situation with her family, which is never fully explained to us, says to her, look, I can get you a scholarship in Pittsburgh. And that's where she goes. She goes to Carnegie Mellon. And so she sort of airlifts herself out of her own native culture into the kind of academic upper middle classes, the sort of technocrat. And it's sort of a story all around the world. I mean, it's, I'm the first in my family to go to college directly out of high school. My background was nothing like Lakeisha's, but, there's lots of people, you arrive at college and you realize there's everyone that's inventing themselves or separating themselves from their childhood, some of them. And so she does that and becomes a technical writer because she's scientifically gifted and literate. And she's also very interested in this project of building a community for herself, which of course she lacks in her new life.
Well, I think it's such a richly imagined novel. That's what kept occurring to me, is the detail of both characters, of Mark's experience, of Lakeisha's experience, Lefebvre. We haven't even gotten to him, the soccer scout from France, the brother in England, Jeff, who is very funny. And I think one of the reviews I read compared his voice to Ali G, which I think sort of gets close to the mark. He's a very great comedic invention. That's an element of this book. It's a funny book in that sense. And so, this took you a number of years, as most novels tend to. And I just want to credit you because it's just one of these novels where I'm like, this feels so lived in. It feels like realer than real. I believed in it. And that's to your credit because obviously you're not a black woman from the north side of Milwaukee, as far as I can tell.
The thing is, when it was published, before it was published, I should say, my publisher said to me, we need to have a sensitivity reader for this. And I was actually quite interested I was happy to do that because I was actually quite interested to hear from somebody who's because I was interested, I'd heard about sensitivity readers. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It sounds like a novel, The Sensitivity Reader. And the wonderful thing is they found a sensitivity reader who is a black woman based in the Midwest, who's an expert on German culture, by the way, and whose husband, I think, is a soccer guy. So they found the most kind of, I don't know, it's by some extraordinary kind of combination of characteristics and attributes. They found someone who was very well positioned to sort of read the book and offer any kind of, and if there were red flags that occurred to them, to offer some sort of to offer advice. But there wasn't really. But it was very interesting reading the report, which read a lot like Lakeisha's voice to me.
Mm. Well, and I want to talk about Lakeisha's voice because it's very well rendered. She is, I think the word circumspect was maybe used in one of the reviews. Like there's something very controlled about her voice and about the way that she operates. And these kinds of people, I've come across people like this. They're the opposite of me. I am not somebody who in an office environment or some sort of group work setting has the ability to kind of like in real time manage my emotions, strategize, like know what to say and what not to say. Like I will fuck that up every time. Like I'm just, I can't shut up. It's like it, but there are people like this. They have a gift and you are able to capture a human being who does have that gift, even though it sounds like you yourself do not.
I don't. I mean, I think I'm okay, but I'm like one of those people who sort of looks back at certain events in their professional events and like, maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut.
Right.
You know, I'm in that cat as opposed to the people who think maybe I should have spoken up. That's not something I ever have that's not. So I'm like you.
Yeah. Well, the word shrewd comes to mind. I think people who have this gift are often described as being shrewd. Like they just have a knack for saying the right thing or not saying the wrong thing. And then for making kind of split-second decisions that end up being optimal or close to optimal. That's fascinating to me. I guess it maybe comes with practice or there's something maybe innate in Lakeisha.
I think it's innate. Don't you think there's from your own experience that people have certain temperaments?
Yeah.
And they gravitate towards environments where that temperament is valued. Whereas in another setting, someone might say, well, this person is kind of boring. But in an office setting, you want those people around, people of good faith who are sort of keep their eye on the ball a little bit and don't get there and don't get in the way of the of what they're thinking about.
Well, and she has an excellent managerial quality because she's trying to juggle a lot of different colleagues and temperaments and perspectives. And some people are loose cannons, and then she's got a guy like Mark who's
a loose cannon, probably a little bit of a loose cannon. Not with his colleagues, but with he's not very committed to his work.
Right.
And he's difficult with clients. He kind of upsets clients a little bit. And of course, that's a problem for the organization. You don't want your colleagues upsetting clients who could easily come to you, next time they want something.
That's right. So that section of the book, those sections of the book, I should say, are beautifully done. And then you have this parallel adventure story unfolding with Mark going over to England at the behest of his brother. He leaves his wife and young child to go over there on a bit of a whim. His brother is a very funny character who is getting into or trying to break into football agenting, like representing players of a high profile and hopefully of a high salary, because agents, of course, receive like some percentage of the take when they represent a player. And the thing I want to say, because I have some exposure to this in my own life, my wife worked on a sports award show for years. It's like it's called the ESPYs, but she worked on it. So I would get to go. Are you familiar with the ESPYs? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know the word.
Yeah. It's like the Oscars for sports in America, essentially.
Yeah.
Where they hand out trophies for like best player, all this kind of stuff. But what's interesting about it is that it is, as far as I know, the highest concentration of elite level American athletes across various sports, all in one place at any point in the calendar year. Like I don't know if anything similar exists where you'll see LeBron James and Lionel Messi and Serena Williams and, all these people all in one place. And I would get to go and I would be backstage. I had all this kind of access because I was the spouse of an employee and I'm a sports fan. And I would just be like, wide-eyed, kind of watching everything go down. And the thing that I want to say, and the thing that I appreciated about the way that you rendered Jeff, is that I could not escape when I was in these kind of private realms, not on camera, but backstage, where you would see all of the players, but you would also see all of the other kinds of personnel, lawyers,
Yes.
media executives, and especially maybe the agents and the people from Nike and all that kind of stuff sort of swirling around these people, especially with the American football players, because that's the biggest money sport in America by a pretty good margin. I could not escape this notion that there was an air of criminality around it. And there was nothing like very obvious in front of my face, but it was just this vibe I got. I was like, man, this is just the Wild West. Like, there is so much money coursing through this room. And it comes to this room through the physical gifts bestowed upon these like 19, 20, 22, 25-year-old kids, essentially. And then you have these kind of older men who are not similarly blessed, who are trying to get a cut. And, Jeff is, I think, emblematic of that experience that I had. And I thought you captured it beautifully and actually also captured some of the absurdity of it. There's something absurd about this arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, the players' agents. I mean, like I said, I spoke to my cousin who is one, and he has all sorts of things to say about it. In fact, it's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I could have written 10 books about the world of soccer. But the word on this question of money, I was speaking to another friend of mine who's in the sports journalism business, and he was talking about how journalists write stories, are paid to write stories on the quiet. So let's say you read a story in a reputable, outlet. You think, oh, well, I'm not going to mention any outlets. But in fact, what's happened is the journalist has been paid on the side to write the story. So it's not just that he's getting tipped, he's actually been paid on the side. And I said to my friend, are you sure that happens? He said, oh my God. He said, yes. He said, this is what you have to understand about football. And I use his quote in the book. Everyone in football is bent. Everyone. And what bends them is the money.
Yes.
There's so much of it going around.
Yes.
And they become kind of addicted to it. It's the sort of excessive compensation of everybody is it's a sort of disease. And I think that Mark falls victim in some ways to the disease of making a fortune and just waking up in the morning and just dunking your head in a big bathtub of cash and snorting it all up. This is what these guys, this is like what they're thinking. Well, this is underlying, this is the unstated kind of ethos of the whole thing. Not for the players, not for the athletes, although they too eventually become bent a little bit and some of them survive it and transcend it and remain athletically kind of focused. But it's part of this degeneracy I felt as I was writing it. It's not really you don't feel it in the book so much, but it was more of a private feeling on my part that on the one hand, football is wonderful, the sport is wonderful, and in fact, the industry is wonderful because it's one of the sport is wonderful generally because in its from the point of view of the pleasure and unity and cultural solidarity it offers people.
Right.
Like the World Cup's coming up. I know that there's all those FIFA guys are just corrupt as hell. They're all making fortunes out of it. Donald Trump's going to somehow make hundreds of millions out of it. And all kinds of people. But for the rest of us, we still connect to those players on the field who are going to be trying their best to win. And so despite the worst efforts of all these side hangers on, the game retains a kind of inextinguishable, so far anyway, integrity of its own, I feel, as a sports fan.
I agree. I feel like there's nothing better than watching a really great like football match or American football game or like baseball game, any kind of sports experience that you're watching in real time where the level of play is extremely high, the stakes are high. There's a human drama that is unfolding that is incredibly compelling and emotional. You get emotionally invested in it in ways that can seem kind of embarrassing. There's like a child in me that I can't help myself. I get locked in and it can like ruin my entire week if my team,
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. I'm the same with football.
Yeah. I just want to go back to this word bent that you used because it echoes something I said in the same context that I was describing earlier, where when you're in the space like I was describing, at close proximity to these athletes and to their hangers-on and to their representation and all of the machinery around them, the human machinery that exists around these games, these businesses, and these players. The word bent is exactly right, because I feel like when there is that much money at stake, it exerts a kind of gravitational force all its own, and it changes human behavior. And what I noticed is that it changed mine in ways that I wasn't even maybe fully conscious of until it had already happened. But like, LeBron James walks into the room and, I'm just like, how do I behave? Do you know what I'm saying? And like, oh my God, it's like my other joke is that, there's a reason why athletes are always thanking God, because when you see these people in real life, you're like, yeah, I'd be thanking God too. If I was born like this and could, I'm 6'9" and I can run a 40-yard dash in, 4.5 seconds, and I can jump, 50 inches in the air. It's like, these people are truly blessed, and it's just wild to kind of be around it and to see it. And your book really captures that. And, I think, as an extension of this narrative, the comedic elements of it we've talked about, this sort of financial and gravitational element we've talked about, but there's also this kind of colonial narrative, because Godwin, who is this prodigy, who we only ever really see via this kind of like internet video, this kind of grainy internet video that Jeff has gotten a hold of, I believe through a source in Turkey. Is that right? Am I remembering? Yeah.
I mean, it's unclear. It's just bubbled up. There's some very dodgy characters involved.
Yeah. So they have this, like Jeff has this video. He's also got a broken leg, which is part of the impetus for him summoning his brother. But he wants to find this Godwin kid who's about like 15 years old, and who on this video they watch, they can just tell like he's got it. He's got the magic. And they then, like Mark then sort of wrestles with whether or not to get involved. He ends up, meeting a French football scout named Jean Lefebvre. Is that how you pronounce his name? Lefebvre?
Lefebvre, yeah.
Yeah, who, another beautifully drawn character. He's kind of the ultimate lifer. He's a football lifer. He's built his entire existence around the game. He's kind of an isolate. He's a solitary figure. He doesn't have a family, right?
He doesn't, not that we're aware of.
Yeah. But
he's a French guy in his 70s who just sits around in a sort of suburb of a provincial French town, dreaming of football players, and we're still trying to make it in his own mind as a kind of man of football.
Well, and the thing about Godwin as this kind of he's a mythical character really on the page, but I guess in the story you're telling, he is a real kid and he's a real talent. But it reminds me, I guess, in some ways of like startup culture and this word unicorn that always gets thrown around when you're talking about like Silicon Valley, venture capitalists. They're always looking for the unicorn. Well, that's what Godwin is. Godwin is a complete athletic unicorn. And once you find a guy like that, you basically pulled the winning Powerball ticket. It's incredibly rare. And in this kind of vaguely criminal world of sports representation and in the world of football, it's incredibly cutthroat and competitive to try to get this guy into your stables, as it were, right?
I mean, it's a very difficult, fickle world, the world of football management, our football age of sports representation. And I mean, and I was speaking to my cousin. My cousin actually tends to act for clubs, because clubs also use intermediaries. Intermediary is the technical term for all these people, because he feels that clubs are more stable. It's very difficult if your client is a football player, because they have families trying to influence the kid. Everyone understands. It's just that thing, right? It's just that thing, right? Everybody understands that the agents are essentially overpaid. and whoever the agent is getting a big payday. But of course, it's like anything. It's like the real estate broker who manages to sell a $30 million property is suddenly making millions of dollars on the transaction, even though it's only really taking on the surface of it. It only requires a few days' work on their part just to show the property and sort of manage the paperwork. And you're like, how's this person getting paid millions? So the sort of resentment that people have towards real estate brokers, which doesn't actually reflect all the hours and hours of unpaid labor those brokers put in to land those contracts, is easily directed at soccer agents too, because you say to yourself, well, hold on a second. Let's say I land Godwin. Let's say he comes through, and let's say he's being paid £200,000 a week, and I'm getting 20%. I mean, already I'm on £40,000 a week.
That's pretty good.
I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, I can retire basically, because after a couple of years, that easily. And what am I doing? I'm not doing anything except making sure that the player has all the, orange juice he needs, and making sure that his contracts and his kind of, commercial representation is happening. So and also the thing about agents, of course, that they have no qualifications. Anyone can become an agent.
Right.
And in the real world, what often happens is the dad often takes an interest, or the mother takes an interest, and they become the agent, and they keep the kind of that slice of the money in the family, as it were. Or the brother becomes the agent. And then so if my brother were, an athletic superstar, I'd become the agent. And if I needed anything, I would just call in lawyers to deal with the contracts, and I would pay the lawyers. But the bulk of the money and the agent's fees would come to me, and I might charge a lesser age. I don't know how that would work. So it's a very interesting world. And as you say, it's cutthroat, and there are no rules. And it's very much a kind of buccaneering pirate world, where whoever grabs the talent the first and kills everybody else is the one who wins.
Yeah.
Because very often, let's say I suddenly realize that you're an amazing basketball player, and I sort of approach you after this conversation. I'd have to sort of, and you say, well, I've already got an agent, and I'd have to, and that wouldn't deter me. I would still come after you, and I would tell you, and I would do whatever it would take to do that. That's how that business works.
It's called poaching.
Poaching. And also, these, as you say, these sports stars are all young men. I mean, LeBron is obviously not a young man anymore, but most of them are young men, and they're very easily influenced. And it's also, and then there's the mystery of business generally. I mean, if you've been in any kind of business, as I was for years as a lawyer, you sort of wonder after a while, how is it that that person over there has these huge clients and generates enormous amounts of work, makes a whole, and you don't sort of see any reason why that should be the case. Some people have the touch. They're good with clients. They focus on people. And I mean, you look at the major soccer agents over the years, they're very unpleasant people. They're not, on the face of it, someone you'd think would be a trustworthy kind of sort of parental type figure for your sports star. But somehow that's the world.
Yeah, they want to maybe you need like an asshole to defend your interests. And
that's the entourage theory, isn't it? With Ari Gold and Entourage, you just get a giant asshole to be on your side.
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, we should mention, I think, like I talked about American football being this huge cash machine. I think that like what is called football everywhere else in the world, soccer here in the States, professional soccer is, I think, by an order of magnitude, even more of a cash machine. Like the players in like the Premier League, like they get paid a fortune, right? I don't have it top of mind, but I think their salaries, I've seen them here and there, and I'm like, oh my God, like these guys are making the real money. It's a very profitable enterprise.
I think the top American football players and baseball pitchers and batters do make huge contracts, like $100 million contracts for 10 years and stuff, or 8 years. Your average, the thing is, the Premier League is now by far the most lucrative sports franchise anywhere, I think. And there's so much money now that even a sort of squad player will make £50,000 a week, £30,000 a week. That's the person who don't even know their name. And if, of course, you play for Manchester United or one of these big clubs, you're making six figures every week. And it's enormous. it's just people don't even understand how much it is. I don't even understand how these players, why they're even thinking about money, because and how it doesn't undermine their sporting vocation in a way. And it does. There's one player at the moment called Jadon Sancho. You can just see he's a very talented guy, and he's 25, and he's already lost interest because he's made so many millions of pounds already. I mean, I don't know that it must at some point. It can distract you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's always a part of the calculation. I think of it in the context of American football. The first contract out of college, there's kind of a set scale. They have a framework that you can't exceed because there's risk involved. Like, is the player going to pan out, right? So in American football, that second contract is what all of these guys are really playing for. That's where things start to get lucrative. And I think part of the calculation that these teams are making is that, like, well, when we pay this guy, if suddenly they're not making nothing, but if he suddenly goes from making $2 million a year to making $30 million a year, is he still going to be out there playing as hard as he can possibly play, or is he going to make all that money and relax? And I mean, it's human nature. I don't know how you wouldn't, but some of these guys I think are so hyper competitive that
I think they are.
Yeah, they just can't turn it off. That's kind of what you want if you're a
That's
team.
What you want. That's what I mean. I think, and the other worry, of course, is if you're paying $30 million a year, is that they're going to find that stressful. If someone said to you, "I'm paying you $30 million a year for this podcast," Brad.
I'm waiting, by the way. I'm waiting.
Okay. Yeah. But you'd think, great, I'll take it. Then you'd be like, what am this next podcast better be good. And I better, you know what I mean? You'd find it would bring pressure with it. Anyway, so yeah. So it's an interesting world. And the specific world this book takes an interest in is African soccer and the history of African soccer, which is, of course, a sort of neo-colonial history in many ways. And because the countries that host, contemporary African soccer are post-colonial societies with all sorts of interesting kind of histories and all sorts of interesting political dynamics still going on. And so for me, that was also an interesting part. I did a field trip to the country where potentially Godwin lives,
which is
Benin, and Benin in West Africa, which was until the 1890s, I think, the kingdom of Dahomey, which was a slaving kingdom, and the port it was out, and it was formerly known as the Slave Coast. And that's the port at Cotonou in Benin, plus one or two others, was one of the main ones for the transatlantic trade, slave trade. And most of the victims of the trade that left that particular port went to Brazil, which is, of course, a great soccer country, and gave us Pelé. Although that's not mentioned explicitly, I always feel like that's where Pelé came from.
Did he come from Benin?
I think he came from around there, yeah. Or certainly, there's every chance that he came from there. He and his like, and some of them made their way further north to the Caribbean, and some of them probably ended up in the United States as well. But it's a very interesting, and of course, it was only colonized. So it was an economy that existed purely for the slave trade. That's how it maintained its independence from the colonial powers. And when slavery was finally abolished in Brazil in the latter part of the 19th century, the Dahomey could no longer function, and the French took it over as a colony.
Wow. Yeah. So you went there.
I did. It's a very interesting place. Yeah. It's a democracy now. And it's a very poor country. It's like 160th, 170th in the world. But I went there, and it was very, very interesting. Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, I'd like to write it as well as you do, and to kind of get that part of the book, like well honed. I can imagine being on the ground there would definitely help. And, I'm going back to these reviews that I've been reading, but there was a comparison made to like Heart of Darkness. Like there's a Conradian element to this, where you have these white privileged guys who have this golden ticket in their hands, this unicorn soccer talent who is somewhere that they're trying to locate, and they're venturing into Africa to essentially try to mine and exploit this talent for their own gain. And that, in a lot of different variations, is a very common story throughout colonial history. And I think
and capitalism generally.
That's right. Extractive cap. Yeah, exactly. So it's very, very much to your credit that you found a way to explore these themes through like a very, I think, to me anyway, recognizable context. This issue of like professional sports, the big money at stake, like sports as a lens through which to explore these. And I think you've actually done this before with Netherland.
Netherland, yeah.
So this is not new to you, but like you.
Well, I love sports, and unfortunately, as a writer, you're stuck with whatever's knocking around in your head, and I seem to be thinking about sports almost all the time. So that's how I came up with this. And so, but as you hopefully will recognize, it's not a novel that pontificates about any of this stuff. It's a novel that sort of situates itself in this world, and it also recognizes, I think, that if you go to Africa, everyone's dream, like it is anywhere else, is to be a professional soccer player.
Sure.
If Manchester United called me up and say, "Could you join the team?" I'm not being like, "I don't want to be exploited by Manchester United."
Right.
You'll be like, "Yes, please."
Yes.
That, and of course there are risks involved for all young footballers. But there's a very specific risk for African footballers, which is that they are subjected to all kinds of fraudulent schemes that's kind of kind of unscrupulous characters get them to sort of give promise them trials and visas and things of that kind if they receive a fee up front, and of course that they don't go anywhere. And so there's a certain amount of scamming going on, such as the desperation of people to become soccer players. But we just saw the African we have the African kind of their sort of continental biannual tournament coming up in January. And if you watch it, it's wonderful. And you see the standard now of football in Africa has dramatically improved. And the culture, it's a huge source of kind of excitement and pleasure in all these countries.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about European football or football in the rest of the world is that, one of the reasons why it is so lucrative is that these leagues are enormously popular the world over. I mean, they have an audience that is truly global. It's the truly global sport, I think, by far compared to anything else. Like I can't think of any sport that matches it.
No, I mean, not in terms of cricket actually is a hugely followed sport, but that's only because there's a couple of billion people who live in India.
Yes.
So, but no, I think the American sport, the sport which is truly global, but on not the same scale, would be basketball.
Right.
Where kids everywhere play basketball, but they don't have. But it's still like the hub of basketball is always the USA. The dream of all these players is to come play in the NBA.
For now. But, I feel like you've seen European teams and thinking of like Spain, Croatia.
Oh, well, the national teams are really good.
Yeah. Some of these teams have really elevated over the past like 20, 30 years. But, I want to talk a little bit about how you sort of came up as a writer. How people sort of form creatively is endlessly interesting to me. And I was doing a little bit of reading before we came on the call, and it sounds like you had like a pretty peripatetic childhood. You were moving around to a lot of different places as a kid, and then you mentioned that you have a legal background. You're a lawyer by training, but now here you are like an award-winning novelist and publishing books. So you just talk a little bit about growing up and then how you came to be a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Ireland. My father's Irish, from Cork. And my mother is from a small Christian community in Turkey. And they met in Turkey in the early 1960s. and got married and produced their 4 children. And my father, who's in the business of building refineries in the 1960s and 70s, all of the countries around the world were having refineries built there. And as soon as they built their refinery, they started their war of independence. And so he built refineries for an American company called Chicago Bridge and Iron, which is a well-known company in the world of engineering. And so we did travel a lot, as you say. But eventually we ended up, and actually my first memories are of Africa. And so this novel sort of takes me back. And I spoke to my father about Africa, which is a kind of slightly discredited concept now. You can't even use the word Africa because it feels too simplistic. It doesn't do justice to the thousands of languages and ethnic groups that live in Africa. But we ended up in Holland. My dad got a job working in Rotterdam. And once he'd finished building whatever it was he was building in Rotterdam, my parents decided that it was a nice country, Holland, better than Iran and Mozambique and these other places where we'd been living. And that my mother and the children would be based in Holland. My father would keep traveling for his job. And so I grew up in Holland, and I went to an international school, and my mother's first language was French, even though she was Turkish, because of this Christian Syrian minority thing that she had going on. And I learned Dutch. And of course, that's where I learned football. I played football on the streets of Holland. And I was fortunate because I grew up at the time of Johan Cruyff and total football. And the Dutch had the best team in the world. And I played football there, and I played cricket there as well. And then eventually I went to university in England from my international school, which was a kind of English school. It's called the British School in the Netherlands, and studied law and settled in London for a number of years working as a barrister. But while I was doing that, I was also writing my first 2 novels. And so, and in my mid-30s, I moved to the United States with my then wife, who was American. And we decided to stay. We came to New York for a bit while I finished a book I was writing. And then she was offered a job in New York, and we decided to stay in New York. And I became a New Yorker. And then 10 years later, I became an American. I became a US citizen.
Wow. So all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. And it's so I don't really have a kind of culture that other people have. I don't have a kind of nationality that I can't write. My childhood will not resonate with anyone else's childhood, apart from maybe my brothers and sisters.
Yeah. It's like global citizen.
Exactly. Yeah.
I kind of have. I mean, I didn't grow up in this same way. I did move around a lot, but all within the United States. But I speak to that sometimes about feeling like there's no place like that I feel like I'm really rooted in. And maybe now that I've lived in Los Angeles for 25 years, it's the closest I come. But I think in a larger sense, like in a celestial, spiritual sense, I'm just an earthling, we're all on this ball together. Nobody knows what's going on. That's kind of my view of things.
Oh, I'm getting increasingly of that opinion as well. Particularly if you think about the biological, the kind of the climate change,
right,
and the fate of animals on this earth and the fate of oceans, and how I don't sort of find myself saying, "Oh, well, I'm not too worried about, what happens to polar bears because they didn't come from my hometown."
Right.
I mean, that's like an idiotic kind of perspective on the world, and from that, and then you just grow it out a little bit, and you realize how problematic it is and illogical it is to sort of prefer the sort of one, a set of outcomes over another based on whether or not you kind of knew these people when they went to high school with you or not.
Well, I mean, I feel like I have like really serious questions about the human impulse to tribalize in any number of ways. I mean, you could come down to sports fandom. This is what we do, right? We group ourselves and we identify with certain things. I'm an American. I'm a Christian. I'm a Muslim. I'm a Hindu. I'm this, I'm that. And I'm like, is this helping us? I mean, I know it's like to some degree we've got to organize ourselves, but I sometimes wonder if it's doing more harm than good for everybody to have these, really intense kind of like identifying patterns. Like, what if we just saw ourselves as like, well, we're all Earthlings? It just seems like it might be a more useful approach rather than kind of splitting off into all these different teams.
No, absolutely. There are, I think that, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time, but I think there are evolutionary reasons that make it compulsory for people to group, to join a group, because you don't survive and propagate if you're on your own.
Right.
You have to form part of a group, and then the group has to prosper. But we're not living in caves anymore.
I was going to say, we're all one group now, essentially.
I know, and we've won. We have defeated the wild animals. And so maybe it's time to sort of, as you say, take a slightly more universal approach. But, there was a time there have been periods like in the 1990s when that kind of universalism and the optimism that one felt with that was very much in the air. But it's obviously at this point, this is a fairly dark and slightly alarming moment we're going through.
No doubt about it. Well, I want to know a little bit more about how you kind of transition from being a barrister or a lawyer to being a writer. I mean, I think writing was always sort of in your brain, but were you like navigating a tension between the two careers? Like, were you thinking to yourself, well, I'm just going to do law, maybe write on the side, it'll be a hobby. And then eventually the writing maybe overtook the law, or did you hate working as a barrister? Like, how did that part of it go?
Well, I mean, I was always writing, and I fell in love with writing with poetry when I was a teenager, and I was obsessed with reading. I was reading it, honestly, more than I was writing it, but reading it with very much with a view towards producing something at some point. And I was from the sort of family where it worked. You wanted to have a kind of practical dimension to your education. I wasn't the sort of family where everyone does a history of art and philosophy, and it felt like it wasn't that sort of family. And so I trained as a lawyer, and I didn't really enjoy the study of law, which you do as an undergraduate in the UK. But I became a barrister, which is the kind of lawyer who wears a wig and gown and appears in court. And
wait, so you were wearing a wig?
I was in due course wearing it, not all the time. only in court, a horsehair wig. But I took a big gamble when I just took my bar exam, and I was just about to be offered a place as a barrister, which is a very difficult thing to get. It's called a tenancy. And basically, you're offered a spot in the chambers, and it's yours for life. And I deferred. I said, I want to take a year off now. I'll be back in a year, which is unheard of because there's like thousands of people going trying to get. And I went off and wrote a novel, and thankfully, it was my first novel, and it got published. And I then went back and said, could I be a barrister now? And they took me on, and I did that, and I did enjoy it a lot, and I enjoyed the collegiality of it. You're self-employed it's a bit like Lakeisha's group. You're self-employed. It's a kind of collective. Each chambers, as they call them, has its own identity. And mine was more business law and various other things. And then I somehow combined that then I wrote another book. I took some time off, 4 months off. That's all I needed in those days to write a book. And I quickly wrote the novel in 4 months, my second novel. But, ultimately, you have to choose, It wouldn't, if you're going to be a sort of a successful lawyer, worthwhile lawyer, you're going to be very, very busy. And same thing with writing. If you're going to write something that's kind of really worthwhile, you can't do it with your left hand. You have to really push it. And so that's what So eventually, when after living in the United States for a year or two, I decided that I would do that, and it was very risky for me. I gave up my career as a lawyer. I didn't even have speaking of agents, I didn't have an agent in the United States. And when I finished Netherland, which was the book that eventually got published in 2008, and I suppose it's my best known book, I couldn't find anyone who wanted to take. But then eventually I found an agent, a fantastic guy called David McCormick, and big sports fan, by the way. And one editor liked it, and that was it. That's all you needed. But I was in my mid-40s at that point. And so it was a rather precarious. It's a precarious situation. Thankfully, thankfully not anymore.
You're the Godwin of midlife, like Irish Dutch novelists who used to be lawyers.
Irish Dutch Turkish.
Yes, Irish Dutch Turkish.
Yeah, former lawyers. Yeah,
that's right.
But there's quite a few lawyers. There's a long tradition of lawyers and writers. Kafka was a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, it's language, it's writing. I mean, on some level, that's what it is. And that detail, that attention to detail. I think there are a lot of maybe people with literary ambitions in law school because it's a more practical path and it's a way to make a sustainable living. But I've also heard that in the profession of law, like there are a few professions where there are more people who are more deeply unhappy in the profession. It tends to breed unhappiness is what I've heard. And I don't know how true that is.
Well, the legal, I don't know either. I know that the American legal profession is not a very appealing one to me. I thought about becoming a lawyer here, incidentally, once, but I decided against it because it's, these big firms. That would have been my natural destiny, was to join one of these big white shoe firms, and then you're just at the mercy of your clients. See, I stopped really practicing full time in 1998, just as they were handing out email addresses, and as soon as lawyers became accessible by email, I think that was the end of their lives.
Yeah.
Because their clients could email them and if you're doing commercial work, which is the sort of stuff I did, you have clients all around the world kind of insisting on talking to you, wherever they are. And so you just become this kind of, you become their servant, essentially. Admittedly very well paid. And of course, you become an employee. And, it's stressful.
Yeah. And exhausting, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think you landed on your feet, and I think you landed in maybe the work that you're really meant to do. It's an excellent novel, Godwin is. And I'm wondering if you're working on anything new. I mean, this is the paperback release of Godwin that we are celebrating now. So I'm imagining you've been writing since then, or no?
I've started writing short stories. And I'm enjoying writing them very much. So I think my next book will be a second book of short stories. I'm not sure if I've got another novel in me. I'm so happy not having to write a novel right now. And at the same time, I'm writing. I feel very fulfilled by the stories that I'm writing. I say stories. I've just written one recently, that we'll see how it. We'll see how it pans out. It's my fantasy is writing a kind of slim 120-page masterpiece, but everyone does that.
Yeah.
Apparently, every single writer I know is like, I just want to write a really Heart of Darkness can't have been more than 120 pages. And everyone starts reciting all these amazing. Death in Venice was like barely kind of 5 pages. Everybody wants the one that doesn't take them 20 years, that they just write naturally, and that somehow you strike gold with it.
Yes.
The Godwin are kind of, the novel that is Godwin. Maybe the quest for Godwin was subconsciously a quest for the novella that would solve all my artistic anxieties.
Yeah. That's the unicorn we're all looking for.
Yeah, that's the unicorn.
Well, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and talking with you. Again, I really love the book, and I wish you well with these short stories, and I wish you well as a sports fan. Who are your teams, by the way? You're a Dutch. Do you cheer for the Netherlands in international play, or do you cheer?
I have, because of I have a whole range of a buffet of teams I can cheer for.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm quite excited by the Irish team, which seems to be potentially going to the World Cup. Has had 2 fantastic results in the last week, beating Portugal and Hungary in the most improbable ways. But the team I really support is Manchester United.
Manchester.
Yeah,
that's your team. All right. Well, I got to get into it. I want, I've long.
No, don't do it, Brad. Don't do it. It's like I had to make a decision when I came here not to get too interested in the sports, because otherwise you're going to spend all your life.
Yeah.
because the culture, as you know, it's not about just watching the game. It's about understanding the history of every player on there, and the history of the club, and the history of their results and their traumas and their triumphs. No, it's a big commitment.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. It's like there's a lot to learn, and then you get emotionally invested, and
Yes.
then, half my morning is taken up reading sports news, and it's like, what am I doing? And like, not to get off on a tangent, but there is something fascinating to me, like this thing that I read long ago that has always stayed with me, and that I've probably talked about on this show more than once, is that the amount of mental energy that men in particular devote to sports fandom, if we instead directed that mental energy towards like civic engagement and like keeping track of like what was going on politically, all these little, votes that happened in Congress on any given day that we have no idea what they're even doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If a similar devotion were applied, we would probably have a saner country.
Not to mention, your memory. Like, why is it that I can remember every stupid detail about sports?
Yes.
But I can't remember who I had dinner with last week.
Yeah, you and me both. We're wired similarly. So I don't know. I guess it's like it's a nice. The thing I will say, I think I noticed this during COVID, especially when things were, foreclosed. The options were foreclosed. We couldn't go out and do things that we would normally do, but there were sports, and I remember feeling like a deeper appreciation for them than I even had already, that I already had. And life is hard. There are worse things to do than watch a ball game, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No harm. No one is being harmed.
I mean, American football, we can make an argument that they're
yes,
but they're getting paid handsomely. I don't know. There are real debates about that I have, and I feel like a moral quandary that I exist in whenever I'm watching one of those games.
You know what? We don't. Thankfully, whatever we think on it's not like politics. We don't have a vote in that matter. We don't have to worry too much about these millionaires with brain damage.
Yeah, I mean, they're making their choices. So. Anyway, great to talk with you. Congratulations on the paperback release of Godwin. Best of luck with your short stories. Best of luck to your various teams.
Thank you, Brad. It's been a great pleasure.
Okay, that's it. That was Joseph O'Neill talking with me about his novel, Godwin, available now in trade paperback from Vintage, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Fiction. A great book and a great talk with Joseph O'Neill. That was fun. Got to talk about sports a little bit. Got to be a man. Talk about football, soccer, corruption, fandom, obsession, all of it. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. One more time, the book is called Godwin, out there now in trade paperback from Vintage. You should read it. It's really good. You can follow Joseph O'Neill on Blue Sky. I do not think he has a website. A cursory glance, and I did not see one. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. Check it out. You know how to Google. Or what is it, DuckDuckGo? You know how to search, right? Don't forget to subscribe to this program wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. Sign up for my newsletter over at Substack. If you listen regularly, if you get something from this program, if you appreciate the work that I do and you would like to see this work continue to flourish on planet Earth, you can support this show at patreon.com/otherpplpod, patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you want to join my book club, the Other People Book Club, or if you want to get an Other People t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you can do all of that at otherppl.com. Don't forget to check out Deep Dive over at deepdive.audio. And remember, the Cyber Monday sale is coming December 1st and December 2nd. It's a 48-hour sale, 50% off of all Deep Dive courses, the perfect gift for the writer in your life. And you can send the gift to their inbox on the day and time of your choosing just by selecting Send as a Gift at checkout. So stay tuned. Finally, if you have a moment and you want to help me out, I would deeply appreciate it if you would rate and review this program wherever you listen. So Apple Podcasts, give it a rating, write a little review. It helps the show algorithmically, and it helps it find new listeners. All right, I think that's it. I think we've reached the end of this episode. I will be back on Tuesday, I think, with another episode, another conversation with another writer. I am not prepared to tell you who it's going to be because it has not been taped yet, but it's in the works. Another episode of Other People coming up on Tuesday.